Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel where I discuss conflict resolution in Africa. If you're new to this channel, kindly subscribe, share and like this video so that you don't miss any of my discussions.
I am telling you now that I'm resigning from my position as the president and all my other positions, and I announce the dissolution of the assembly and the government.
The crisis in Mali is very serious and the events there are unfolding very fast. The president and prime minister were detained but later released. Then the president had to resign from his post. Cabinet had to be dissolved. And now the coup leader, Colonel Ibrahim Keita, was announced as the new country's transition president. The mediators of this conflict have a few things they have to consider. Are these coups just unconstitutional changes of government or acts of social justice? But before we go into the details, let me first define what a coup d'etat is. A coup d'etat is defined as the infiltration of a small but critical segment of the state apparatus, which is then used to depose the government. Or we can simply say that a coup is an exchange of power between elites via military force without significant national transformations. Observers are now startled to observe how Mali's coups are occurring one after another. First, it was the forced removal of former President Ibrahim Keita about 9 months ago. And now, the interim transition president Ba Ndaw and his prime minister were on May 25th deposed and detained by the military in one of their bases outside Bamako. This happened hours after government replaced 2 army officers involved in last year's coup. It should be remembered that President Ba and his prime minister have been running this interim government since last August, when a military coup deposed former President Ibrahim Keita. The coup followed weeks of anti-government rallies over increased insecurity, alleged corruption, and a faltering economy. His removal was widely praised, but the change has been moving at a glacial pace for the past 9 months, generating tensions. As I speak, Ibrahim Keita, the coup leader in Mali, has retaken control, claiming that President Ba and his prime minister failed to fulfill their responsibilities and were attempting to hinder the country's transition. He questioned how 2 military commanders were dropped in a cabinet reshuffle without his consent and why he wasn't named as the vice president in the reshuffle. So how much do we know about military takeovers? Do you know that military coups can also be acts of social justice to bring about regime change? And I know that they've worked in so many other African countries and actually people have secured peace. Military coups are frequently advocated as a means of putting an end to state-sanctioned atrocities. Despite this, we don't have a good understanding of the exact consequences. Now, in the case of Keita, one could argue that this coup was carried out in response to anti-government protests that the military and opposition in Mali saw as state repression. As a result, the military decided to take advantage of the element of chance, and their coup surprisingly succeeded. Chance, in this case, is referring to the possibility of failure or success. However, the international community strongly condemned the coup as opposed to the local community which welcomed it. The current theory of civil-military relations is still primarily concerned with preventing a military coup. Despite this, history is littered with examples of soldiers staging military coups in order to side with the civilian population rather than the civil authority, as we have seen in the Keita coup. What I didn't hear from the mediators of the Keita coup was whether or not the military coup was an act of social justice, given the reasons why it happened, and the fact that even if Keita was offered the opportunity to return to power, he turned it down as if he had had enough. So what problem was being addressed? The coup or the root causes of the coup that qualify to be an act of social justice? In my opinion, mediators must also look deeper beyond their set rules and look at situations as they present themselves. In the case of the Keita coup, they should investigate if the coup was indeed an act of social justice or not. This would then help them to determine if it's a good or bad unconstitutional change of government. The coup that ousted President Mugabe of Zimbabwe from power is a good example. To me, his removal mitigated a big portion of the political crisis that was about to cause chaos in the country's leadership. And there are many other military coups that have secured peace, such as the military coup that brought Uganda's President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni to power in 1986 and caused fundamental change in the country's history. Instead of condemning the coup at the time, Mr. Museveni was rather celebrated by the West as a new generation of African leaders. However, there are no links between President Ba and his Prime Minister's recent coup and state-sponsored atrocities, which perplexes conflict managers as to why the Malian military staged this coup. Keita is afraid that after the transition, the civilian politicians will not give him the position of vice president as he desires, so he has decided to press his panic button by staging another coup within a coup. On the other hand, the majority of Malians believe the military has failed in its mission to combat the Islamist insurgency that has spread to Burkina Faso. Contrary to common belief, coups do not calm down repressive autocrats. Coups, on the other hand, appear to aggravate the situation even when they target leaders who perpetrate large-scale human rights breaches, as in Mali. These two coups in Mali are escalating the crisis and have complicated conflict resolution measures, particularly those put in place by ECOWAS, which is at the center of peace negotiations in this West African country. The African Union has a zero-tolerance policy on military coups in Africa. How effective is this policy? In 1999, the Organization of African Unity, OAU, the AU's predecessor, agreed to reject military coups for the first time. When the OAU became the AU in 2002, the new organization's founding Constitutive Act contained condemnation and rejection of unconstitutional transitions of power as one of its principles. In 2010, another coup was looming in Niger, just as the crisis in Guinea seemed to be reaching a peaceful conclusion. As a result, African leaders at one of their summits in the same year were forced to increase the pressure by adopting a resolution declaring a zero-tolerance policy for military coups and other abuses of democratic standards. We saw some of this work when the African Union Peace and Security Council suspended South Sudan's participation in all of its activities in 2019 as a conflict management measure to force it to establish civilian rule. In October 2020, similar steps were taken for Mali, but rather lifted after the military agreed to transfer power to civilians. But here is the complex issue. Why would the Mali military junta agree to hand over power to civilians, but then deny them the ability to exercise their full authority? If the coup is unconstitutional, why then would the perpetrators of such coups be allowed to be part of the transition government while still serving in their military capacities? As you can see, after President Ba and his executives fired the military officers, Keita stepped in and removed the president. This means that the military would be difficult for the conflict's mediators to trust. As a result, the African Union, ECOWAS, the United States, the European Union, France, and other partners must impose civilian sanctions on this military government in order to force it to return to civilian rule and maintain it. The question, however, is, what influence will Keita have over the military forces even if the sanctions work and Keita transfers authority to civilian rule? How confident will the next civilian president be in his ability to prevent a coup? The AU's dilemma in implementing its coup policy is how they determine that a particular coup underwent either a bad or good unconstitutional change of government, especially when, for the case of Mali, Malians felt that they were oppressed by the state and welcomed the coup.
We have come out today to call for the total resignation of President Keita because we heard there were shots fired by the military, and we've come out to help our soldiers get rid of the president.
On est fatigué. We are tired. The country is paralysed, and I do not want this government.
We all know that this coup happened within a coup. But what exactly is the source of this new crisis? 1. The biggest union strike has lasted weeks and is threatening to paralyze the economy. President Ba is being blamed for not doing enough to stop it. There are also fears that it would lead to additional protests. The other reason is the sacking of 2 military officers, Colonel Sadio Kamara and Colonel Modibo, who served as ministers of defense and security. M5, RPF, the opposition organization that organized the protests last year, is also enraged that it was not given any government post. Then there is the coup leader, Colonel Keita, who says that he was not consulted about the cabinet reshuffle in which he is a vice president. And it should be noted that he is the real power broker in this conflict. Furthermore, public trust in the army's ability to combat the Islamist insurgency that has spread to neighboring Burkina Faso and Niger is eroding. Moving forward, it is preventive diplomacy that is expected to solve the Mali crisis. But where do mediators start from? Now that Colonel Keita has virtually torn up that agreement by taking command, ECOWAS faces a difficult task in negotiating a transition agreement that will last. That is if Colonel Keita listens to them again. The other thing is that sanctions are a possibility. France, the former colonial power, has threatened EU sanctions on the offenders, with President Emmanuel Macron calling it a coup within a coup. In addition to this, state and non-state actors, civil society, and elders that have influence over any of the hurting parties should be part of the negotiations. Remember, this is a Mali problem, and it may need a Malian solution. So, international or regional intervention may play well with offering expertise and guidance, but not owning the conflict or introducing their own ways of doing things that do not help the local situation. I thank you for your company, and please don't forget to subscribe, share, or like this video so that you don't miss any of our next discussions. And if you have a comment, please leave it in the comment section below. Thank you. Bye.